And now here we are for more thoughts from Tumortown with Bruce. All right, guys. let's uh, let's continue on with healthcare. I just want to talk briefly about Obamacare, as most people call it. Um, a lot of people think I would just naturally be a big advocate for Obamacare, and they're wrong. It was a flawed piece of legislation from the beginning, but it really illustrated how dysfunctional we are as a nation. Really, really bad, right? Because when we were going to have this great healthcare discussion, right, all of a sudden, well, any talk of regulation of pharmaceutical prices off the table. Any idea of extending Medicare to everyone off the table. Any idea of universal health care in any place off the table, right? There were so many things that were off the table from a discussion standpoint that how could we honestly discuss our healthcare situation? It was impossible. It was absolutely ridiculous, right? And then here we go with just how, inane our system is as a society right now. Or was even back then. I mean, how bad it was, right? The legislation is proposed, it comes out, everybody's like, oh my God, this is like a 2,000-page document. Oh my, I am probably one of the few citizens who actually read the damn thing, right? Only the first couple hundred pages was Obamacare. Everything else were just changes, alterations, clarifications to Medicare. Had nothing to do with Obamacare. Nothing. But everybody kind of got in this little whole ramp. Oh my gosh, it's a 2,000-page document. Oh my goodness. And nobody bothered to point out, well, it's not really 2,000 pages, And then we got they're going to pull the plug on grandma. And that really just did it for me, because that was a piece in the legislation that was about Medicare. And all it was it was going to allow Medicare to pay for a Medicare enrollee to have a discussion with a doctor or a certified clinician about end-of-life choices, period. And they could do that once every 3 years with a couple of exceptions, like, if all of a sudden they told you had cancer, you could go talk to somebody then, And that got spun around by the conservatives as they're going to pull the plug on grandma. This is a death panel. I mean, how you get from that to that is absolutely beyond my comprehension. That is such a leap of brain matter that I find it hard to imagine anybody has so little brain matter that they could make that kind of a jump. I mean, really. And I mean, just before I leave that topic, I mean, let's be honest about it. End of life is something every person should have a discussion about, and probably numerous discussions. Discussions with your spouse, your family, your doctors, so you understand what you want and what you don't want to happen when the time comes, or is right there in front of you, right? Do you want us to go and keep you alive no matter what for as long as we humanly can? Or at what point do you want us to stop and, let nature take its course, right? When you're comatose and you've been that way for X number of days, when you're pronounced brain dead, what? When? These are discussions people should have. Because I have seen situations like this where it tears families apart, right? You get, half of the children are like, no, I know for a fact Mom would not want to be left like this. She did not want to be left in this, comatose, on breathing tubes and machines keeping her alive. This is not what she wanted. And the other children, oh, yes, she did. She can make it. A miracle can happen. We're going to do everything we can to keep Mom alive. I mean, it could end up going to court. And there's no reason for this to happen. None. Just, and that's all that legislation was for Medicare to pay for one session of a patient with a clinician to talk about end-of-life options. That's it. Just as benign as that. And it got whipped into all that. And I heard senators talk about it that way, representatives, news media, you name it, they all did. And they were liars and they knew it. And my stomach just turned. It was just so pathetic, And they did so much of this behind closed doors, and they did it so fast that it just turned into a piece of crap. It did a couple of decent things, okay. Some people got to keep their kids on their insurance till they were 26. That helped some people. That was nice. We got rid of the limit, right? So there was no limit on how much they would have to pay out if you were a insurance member, right? You used to have like $1 million limit. Oh no, those went away. That was a good thing. No one could be denied, right? That was a great thing. Probably the very best thing that Obamacare did was take away the precondition stipulation that insurance companies love to run. That was great, But the best, but did it really make great monumental changes? No, it didn't. It was a Band-Aid, right? It was maybe a point down the road to say, well, I'm kind of trying to turn this way, But we're only starting to make the turn. We didn't really make the turn. We're starting to make the turn. So in that case, in many ways, it was a flawed piece of legislation. And I want to talk about this simply because I want to make a comparison to what I understand about Switzerland. And they're the nearest thing to us, right? They had the same pretty much healthcare system we had. Very similar. Right? But they, back in, I think it was the early 90s, they began to see what everybody else saw, which is why the rest of the world have universal healthcare systems, right? Everybody in. Is that if you let a system like ours just continue to go, it is unsustainable in the long term. You simply can't do it. So they had to change. They had to do something. But in typical Swiss fashion, right, they engaged in a national debate that I believe went on for a year. They held town halls. They had televised hearings. They did all this stuff, going over and talking about various kind of ways they could do things. And everyone was encouraged, to send in an idea. You got a model, for a system, a plan, a design, let's hear it. Right? And they went through this. And they narrowed it down. And once they finally got it down to a group, then they really kind of like almost had a finalist competition. And they went through it. And with everybody again. And these were rational, cohesive, national discussions. Right? No one was throwing eggs at things. No one was making up lies, and running a bunch of BS. Everyone was being dead honest about what the situation was and what their system would do. Until they finally developed a system that they settled on. They said, okay, this is it. They put it up for a referendum, and the population voted it in. Right? They had been informed and educated enough. Yes, we want it. We're going to do it. And so in they went into the system. right? And it's a universal system. Everybody's in. Everybody pays a premium. You know, if you're on the scale, the poverty scale, you get government assistance to meet your premium to make sure you have the coverage. Everybody's in. Nobody's ever left out, right? They have pricing differences between regions, right? Because some regions are far more, populated and urban than others, right? So they have that. They actually went in, even though many pharmaceutical companies are based there, they regulated the pharmaceutical industry, right? They had the wherewithal to do that, and they stepped in and they did it. And they put together a system that makes them the second most expensive system in the world behind us. But it's a system that guarantees every Swiss citizen access to the same quality health care as every other Swiss citizen. And that says something. That's the value the Swiss put on it. That it was that important to them as a nation and as a society that they insisted that it be done. Now, this is a great story. I encourage anyone to go and look it up and read about it. Because it's a wonderful story of how this all went down. And then sometime later they had a follow-up referendum to see if everybody still wanted to keep it or do they want to change it and, see if they could go to something else. And it passed again. And so that was that. The system was now in place. That was the official healthcare system of Switzerland. And going forward, they would simply make adjustments to it here and there as were deemed necessary. Now, why can't we, in the United States, do something rational and logical like that? Why is that so impossible for us? Why must we lie so viciously to try and sway people? Like all of the stuff in Brexit. Why must we do this? Why are we incapable of having a 1-year, honest and open national discussion about healthcare? Why? Boggles my mind. We should be a much more mature and intellectual nation than we are, by far. Because we can be so much more than we are. We can be so much better than we are. But that's the way it is, right? So Obamacare still exists. Some things are there, some things aren't, but it moves on. And I think there are elements of it, like universal acceptance that will never be removed again. We'll never go back. At least I certainly hope not. To, pre-qualifying or qualifying or pre-existing conditions, excuse me. So that's just kind of my story of Obamacare and Switzerland and how they got to where they are and why we can't seem to do better. We certainly deserve it. We need a better healthcare system than we have. We certainly have the personnel and the equipment and the infrastructure to do it. Why we don't, I don't know. And I can certainly say, in my experience, I have seen the absolute best in American medicine, and I have seen the absolute worst. Absolutely. And actually, in one case, I saw it within the same patient, my mother. She had a particular heart procedure. I can't remember precisely which one it was. And when they took her up to the recovery, intensive care, fluid was beginning to build up around her heart, right on the outside of her heart, in the sac. And this is not good. But the nurses and personnel up on the ICU didn't really take that seriously. They didn't pay any real attention to it, and they just kind of went about their business, and my mother coded. Now they're like, oh gosh, mighty. And, as luck would have it, her thoracic surgeon, her cardiac surgeon, was there in the ICU at the moment she coded. And he went in, opened her up right there in her ICU bed, massaged her heart with his hand, and pulled the fluid off, and revived my mother, and then resutured her up. And she went on to survive and recover. The only altercation from that was the fact that she ended up with MRSA. Surface MRSA. Wouldn't have gotten that otherwise, but, just a complication we had to deal with again. But, on one hand, the nurses should have caught that way early, and it could have been dealt with. They didn't. That's the worst of medicine. When something like that just isn't picked up on, isn't caught, that's the worst of medicine. But that doctor stepping in and opening her up and doing it right then and there, that's the best of medicine. So, always hope you get the best, but never bank on it. That's all I can say. I've certainly had some of the best, and I've had some of the worst done to me. So, I know from where it goes. So that's all for this. I will step out now and contemplate what I'm going to do for the next video, and we will go from there. All right, everybody. Peace, and hang 10.